So this week we're going to talk about the cardiovascular system. Here's a list of the learning objectives. Cardiovascular is talking about the heart and blood vessels. This is an overview of all of the different parts of the cardiovascular system. The heart lies directly in the center of the chest, also known as the thoracic cavity, within the pericardial cavity, underneath the sternum. A lot of people think that the heart is slightly on the left side of the body, but that's not true. It's centered directly in the center of the chest. The left side of the heart, however, is larger because there's a thicker muscle on the left side of the heart because it pumps blood to the rest of the body. So it's thicker on that side, a little bit more of the heart sticks out on the left side, but the heart is centered in the center of the chest. Most of your heart sounds are also heard on the left side because of the way that the heart valves are angled down. So this is a diagram of the heart, and you can see right here underneath the sternum is where the heart is. And there's several layers that surround the heart. The pericardium is talking about a sac of connective tissue that surrounds the heart. There's the fibrous pericardium, which is the outermost layer, and that's sometimes called the pericardial sac. Just underneath that layer is the parietal and visceral layer of the serous pericardium, and then there's pericardial space between them. So the parietal layer is this layer, coats the inside of the fibrous pericardium. The visceral layer is actually the outer surface of the heart, and in between those two is the pericardial space. The function of the heart coverings is to prevent friction as the heart moves inside of the chest cavity. The heart itself has 3 layers. The epicardium is also called the visceral pericardium. That's that outermost layer of the heart. If we go back to this picture, this is the epicardium, or visceral pericardium. The myocardium is talking about the muscle tissue. So all of this muscle thickness is the myocardium. And the endocardium is a connective tissue that lines the inner cavities of the heart. If we look here, the endocardium is just this innermost layer. There are 4 major chambers to the heart: the right atrium, the left atrium, the right ventricle, the left ventricle. The atria actually sit on top of the heart as auricles, so they're little flaps of tissue that kind of fold on top of the heart. The ventricles make up a majority of the heart. If we talk about the blood flow through the heart, blood is going to enter the heart through the superior vena cava or inferior vena cava, and it enters into the right atrium. Remember, when we're referring to the heart, we're referring to as if this were inside of the patient. So if we're looking at a patient's heart, this is the right side of the patient's body, so that's why we're calling this the right side of the heart. So from the right atrium, we go through the first valve here. And the first valve has 3 leaflets. This is known as the tricuspid valve. And then we end up in the right ventricle. From the right ventricle, the ventricle contracts and pushes blood up and out of the heart to the lungs. So we go through this valve, the pulmonic valve, to the pulmonary artery, to the lungs. In the lungs, the blood is going to exchange gases so that oxygen enters into the blood and carbon dioxide leaves the blood as waste. But from the lungs, we're going to come back into the heart through the pulmonary veins. and we enter into the left atrium. On the left side of the heart, we have this two-lobed valve known as the bicuspid valve. Sometimes referred to as the mitral valve. And then down into the left ventricle. From the left ventricle, blood is going to be pumped up and out of the heart to the rest of the body. So it goes through the aortic valve, into the aorta, and to the rest of the body. So the AV valves, the atrioventricular valves, are the valves that are going to lie between the atria and the ventricles. These include the tricuspid and bicuspid or mitral valves. The semilunar valves are the valves that are going to lead to the outside of the heart, and those include the pulmonic and aortic valves. The lub-dub pause sound that you hear, those heart sounds, are actually the closing of the valves. If we talk about how the heart works, both atria are going to contract in unison and push blood down into the ventricles. Then, both ventricles are going to contract to try to push blood up and out of the heart. When the ventricles start to contract, these doors, the tricuspid and bicuspid valve, have to close because we don't want blood going back into the atria. We want it leaving the heart. So that first sound that you hear, the lub sound, is the closing of the AV valves. Now, we've pushed blood up and out of the heart, and as the ventricles start to relax, we don't want blood to come back into the heart. So this pulmonic and aortic valve are going to shut next, and that's what forms the second heart sound, that dub sound. So this is the location of the four valves and where you can approximately hear their sounds. And here you can see another demonstration or depiction of where those are located. Some of the homeostatic imbalances associated with the heart sounds include a heart murmur. So a heart murmur is an abnormal heart sound. Sometimes this can be due to a failure of the valves to close completely. So in between beats, you'll hear some whooshing and swirring sounds of the blood moving around in the heart. And then there's also this thing known as the hole in the heart. If we go back to the picture of the heart, you can see that the right ventricle and left ventricle are separated by this septum here. And that septum is known as the interventricular septum. Sometimes babies are born with defects such that there's a hole that connects these two ventricles. Now, deoxygenated blood is on the right side of the heart. This comes from the rest of the body to go to the lungs to get oxygen. Oxygenated blood is on the left side of the heart, so this just came back from the lungs and now it's going to go to the rest of the body to deliver oxygen. If we have the mixing of deoxygenated and oxygenated blood, that's going to decrease our overall oxygen concentration of the blood, and that can cause some major health deficits. So this can be surgically repaired. Usually it's caught early and it's diagnosed and that gets fixed. But a hole in the heart is talking about a hole in that interventricular septum. We also have something that can happen called stenosis. Stenosis is narrowing of the valves, and that can prevent the flow of blood through the heart, and it can lead to all sorts of bad things happening, including frequent blood clots and potentially stroke and decrease of blood flow through the heart. All of that can lead to an enlarged heart. The heart has to work a little bit harder in order to get blood to move through those narrower valves, and that can have some devastating effects. So in that case, sometimes you can open up those heart valves surgically or through some type of ablation procedure.